Okay, let's begin.
Good morning, Patriot listeners. This is Susan Smith. Jeremy Munson's here with me. We are Political Pitchforks, and we have a very special guest today, Representative Walter Hudson, District 30A, right?
That's it.
And he is, for sure, one of our most vocal Republican representatives. He is pretty unabashed in his willingness to say what he thinks and what's going on. And anyways, Walter, we have a lot going on. You're a busy guy. There's a lot happening. And we are dealing right now with just thing after thing after thing after thing after thing in Minnesota. And right now we have a new issue. We have our governor, Walz, is bringing in Optum Health to apparently help solve all the problems. So with our fraud in our healthcare system. And maybe, I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy? How's it going to go?
Look, I have very little faith that Optum Health is going to be the proper filter for rooting out Medicaid fraud. Optum Health, for those who don't know, this company is a subsidiary of United Health Group, and United Health Group is a massive health insurance company that is being currently investigated for Medicaid fraud by the federal government. So we have, and by the way, this is the company whose CEO was assassinated in New York. Was it earlier this year or last year? And is like the most evil corporation in the Democrats' eyes in Minnesota. This is a company who's been in business in Minnesota for many years. They're based in Golden Valley, but they were prohibited by law from offering health insurance in Minnesota because our laws said only nonprofits could have health insurance. And this is a massively for-profit company. They get tens of billions of dollars a year in profit, and for Walz to choose Optum Health to be the filter for fraud is like he's just pulling in the Republicans to point fingers at. I don't see this as being the solution. I don't think they're going to be really that interested in finding fraud because a lot of this is going to be run through UHG for billing. And two, there's a lot of legitimate hospitals and clinics who are already complaining that this is going to slow down payments to them by up to 90 days in order for Optum to try to sniff out fraud. And for a lot of small clinics in hospitals and independent providers, a 90-day pause on payments will break the bank.
What do you think, Walter?
I don't contest that analysis at all. And I would just say that it's very clear that Tim Walz has no interest in doing anything that's actually going to work. He has an interest in doing things so that he can say he did things.
Right.
He doesn't have an interest in actually stopping the fraud. If he did, then he wouldn't have put the brakes on the independent Office of Inspector General that would have been statewide enterprise with police power. That was the most well-vetted bill and idea I've ever seen in my short time in the legislature. Patty Anderson, working with a colleague in the Democrat Senate, was having weekly, sometimes twice a week meetings with members in both chambers, at both sides of the aisle. And it went through something like 12 different committees and was ultimately passed by the Democrat-controlled Senate, something like 60-7 in terms of the vote. I mean, overwhelming. And you don't see that every day.
Right, never.
And then all of a sudden it comes to the House and it's, we can't do this. And that directive came down from Tim Walz and Speaker Emeritus Melissa Hortman. Why?
Right.
Why?
That's a rhetorical question if I've ever heard one.
I wrote that same bill, Walter, when I was in the House to create this independent auditor with all these attorneys that would work to root out, to investigate and make arrests for fraud. And in the end, that bill looked very much like the Office of Attorney General. Because that is their job to find fraud and to prosecute it. They said you basically recreated an exact copy of the Attorney General's office, and that's his job, and he's not doing his job.
Well, that's
but,
it.
But that bill would allocate more resources and funding to spend more time, investigating it. Because honestly, the Attorney General, in his defense, has to determine, well, do we go after violent crime or do we go after, voter fraud and white collar crimes like this? And I can see why violent crime is being prioritized.
Wait, it is?
Well, it should be.
Okay, just a question. All right. I don't know. what's the solution? Like, what do we do?
Well, so this is the analogy that I use, and it's not a perfect analogy because it's not like something that actually happens in the real world, but it's the only thing I can think of at the moment. Imagine for some reason, like say your kid or something took the hose from outside and stuck it through the window, and now the water's pouring into your house. Is the first thing you're going to do look for a mop to start mopping it up? Or is the first thing you do going to be run outside and turn off the faucet?
Right.
Turn it off at the source, right? That's the solution. We have the U.S. Attorney, Joe Thompson, coming out with a mere 8 indictments, which sounds like a lot until he goes on to tell you, I could keep 1,000 prosecutors busy, and I only have 5 working on this and 25 in my office.
It's one of the greatest quotes, right? We can't prosecute our way out of this.
We can't prosecute our way out of this, which is another way of saying injustice shall stand. People are going to get away with this. That is the water accumulating in your house because you haven't turned off the faucet. That's the first thing that needs to happen. I mean, that solves it immediately, right? You turn off the money, no more fraud. And then try to work your way through the mess that's been created since.
So I thought the same thing, Walter, when the CCAP, the Child Care Assistance Program fraud came out, where it was so prevalent, where the Office of the Legislative Office of Legislative Auditor, the OLA, came to testify in committee and said there's at least $100 million, if not $150 million in fraudulent child care assistance claims every year, which makes up about 40 to 50% of all the money that's being spent in this program, right? And so, I mean, I and a couple of the legislators authored a bill to just shut it down. We need to turn off that faucet, because how much fraud is acceptable? If it's 5%, can you root it out and prosecute it? But when it's like 40, 50% of all the money going out the door that's fraud, you have to shut it down. And knowing that when you do, some people are going to be, hurt financially by this. But when you're talking about healthcare services, shutting off healthcare for people, you're potentially going to kill people, is what the Democrats are going to say. But you can't just say, look, we got to shut everything down in order to find, and to stop the whole program, because all this money going out the door is money we don't have. Right. It's debt.
Yeah, well, that's money that can't be spent on other things. It's money that can't be returned to the taxpayer, right? And it's just an absolute tragedy. But I don't think that it's an unintentional one. Like, I firmly believe at this point that all of this was set up in some sort of organized scheme to basically turn the state government into one giant racketeering operation. Because nothing else makes sense, right? It's like it's Occam's razor. What's the simplest explanation for how this happened? Well, on purpose. You got the U.S. Attorney saying that within a year of the Housing Stabilization Services Program being implemented, there were hundreds of entities set up specifically to engage in this fraud. In some cases, 12 to 24 of them in the same office building.
Right.
Okay. Are we saying that Somalis are just really, really good at this? Or is it more likely that they were shown the way, right?
Shown the way.
Here's how you do it. Here's how you get your lease.
Right.
Here's how you set up your business filing. Here's how you engage in the billing. I have a really hard time believing that independently hundreds of people just decided that they were going to do this on their own.
Well, I can just tell you, these systems are very complicated. And I know many, many people who have thought about getting these licenses and trying to do these things because they have a legitimate interest in it. And they don't do it because it's complicated. So the idea that a bunch of people who are immigrants, refugees, some of them, this isn't their native language, suddenly have found a path to do these things is completely, it's just nonsensical. So if that's the reality of it, right? Is that there are people, I'm sure, creating a process that helps other people do things, and it's in the nursing, and it's a problem. And we're not gonna, it's not an easy solve, because they are providing services to the most vulnerable people in our system. And if you take those services away, Jeremy's not wrong. Well, we'll pick this up. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to Political Pitchforks, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and Walter Hudson, state rep. And we're talking about some of the issues with fraud in Minnesota, the Medicaid billing. The Optum is now going to be providing oversight and monitoring all of these issues, and there's concerns about that. And the legislature, obviously not in session right now, and there's not a special session that we know of right now. This certainly could come up, I guess, if it were, but maybe that's why we're not going to have one. I don't know. But it just seems like things are not getting better. Every day the news is worse. There are more problems. And it's like when your house is a mess, like you talk about a flood, and where do you start cleaning it up, right? Yeah, even if we turn off the water, it seems to me like every room in the house has been destroyed, almost, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate analogy.
So it's going to take a lot of cleanup, and frankly, it's going to likely take a call on all of the nonprofits, the churches, communities, to really be prepared to help in a transition of correcting our state, which is, by the way, what should be happening anyways, right? We should be helping our local communities. And when we rely on government to create program after program after program, it just never ends, right? And we become disengaged in our communities.
Right.
So we feel like every day, well, I don't have to worry about that because there's a program.
Right.
Right. You know, that homeless guy on the street, why doesn't he just go to the shelter? You know, there's a lot of places. And what we know is actually our system is failing. We're putting all this money in, and actually there isn't anywhere for the homeless guy to go, to be totally honest with you. Far too many people have nowhere to go, right? I mean, we have a problem. Too much government, ineffective use of dollars at the federal and state level, and citizens looking around going, I don't even know how to fix it because I'm about to get hit with higher healthcare costs. I'm about to get hit with increased property taxes. Wait till these school referendums pass. People like, I don't have any extra money, right? And so what are we going to do?
Susan, you're absolutely right. And, one of the things that I learned in state government is that government doesn't like competition, especially when it comes to charity. And so all these services that the government provides, there are nonprofits and churches and groups out there that offer that take donations from the community and then turn around and offer services and goodwill to the community. And what does government do? They go in and tax the snot out of them on the revenue. It's not like it's profits. These are nonprofits. You know, whether it's you're raising money for the local kids hockey group, or you're raising money to help with transplanted eyes or whatever that the Lions Club does. Government comes in and tries to tax their earnings from charity or pull tabs or whatever at 80%, because government doesn't like competition, and they don't want the private groups out there taking care of the citizens, or the government wants to get involved in doing that so it can continue to grow. I want to touch on the Somali issue again, because we talk about amazingly how many of these fraudsters are of Somali descent. And it is really thick in the culture of Africa for defrauding government, because these nations receive so much foreign aid, and it just we shower their country with all this foreign aid, and people at all levels of government just take, because there's no guardrails on that. And so then they come here and they see that we have no guardrails on our programs, and it's just ripe for the picking. Not giving them an excuse, but I'm saying it's ingrained in the culture of a lot of the immigrants from Africa to take from government if you can.
Yeah, the way that I've addressed this, because I've raised this point as well, the cultural point, which you have to speak about with nuance, right? Because it's just the reality of a cultural origin. At the same time, it's not immutable. It's not like baked into the cake where people can't change and a culture can't assimilate. And so the reason why this is the analogy I use. Like, most of us, if we were walking behind somebody and a $20 bill fell out of their pocket, we would pick it up and say, hey, you dropped this, right? Whereas when you come from a kleptocracy, you're going to say, ooh, this is how I'm eating for the next 2 days.
Right.
Because that's how you get by. You get by taking opportunities to take from other people. There is no see. We think of it from a Western standpoint of, well, why don't you just get a job, start a business, be productive? There isn't the mechanisms over there to do that, to be what we would consider to be a productive citizen. we do have those mechanisms here, but it requires a process of assimilation for people to embrace that. And many have. There's lots of business owners, there's lots of restaurants, there's lots of businesses in that area, and Somali business owners and community leaders. But you've got this element that has subscribed to what the Democrats have sold, which is a two-plank platform. Republicans want you dead, we'll make you rich. It's a pretty stark contrast, right? Dead or rich. And it's pretty easy for folks to look at that and say, I'll take the rich. I'll take the money.
But I think also, and maybe I'm naive, I mean, it's highly possible. I'm willing to concede that as a starting point of this statement I'm going to make. To me, one of the things that I've observed is that some of these refugees, I think a lot of them, they came here not because they wanted to come here. They came here because they were brought here for war reasons. And, we don't always know, or maybe we did know who the warlords were, who the people were leading those communities. And so what you did is we took a group of people and you transplanted a construct, a social construct there, which was based on people surviving, people having to take orders and do what they're told and whatever. It's a survival way of living. It's in our society from beginning to end. If they were born here, we would consider it, there's a lot of abuse, trauma, things like that. We would openly examine. These people come here and they're plopped down in a community that isolates itself, and for religious reasons also kind of isolates itself. Language isolates itself. And then, but we've brought with probably a lot of good people who don't know any other way of life, the people that had controlled them previously. Mm-hmm. And so they're immediately placed in a silo, and literally, in Riverside, in a silo, where honestly, they have a precinct right outside their door, literally right outside their door. And it's virtually all, the absentee balloting is crazy, even though it's right there because of the concern about ballot harvesting, things like that. So we have people who, for all kinds of reasons, are vulnerable, language barriers, et cetera, and they are given guidance and information about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And I think there's a very serious concern about whether or not many of these people, they don't even know how to not do the things that they're doing, because it's literally the way they survive, even in America. Mm-hmm. That's how they survive. Because if you are a person, I'm just going to say, let's say you're a woman, a Somali woman, and you're looking around going, this is crazy. My kid doesn't have autism. I don't have any, right? What are you going to do? You're going to go, hey, guys, I'm not doing this, right? What are you going to do? How do you not participate if you're told to participate? I don't even, do you understand? I mean, so I'd like to think that everybody has free will and we all could teach them that they can do what they want. They're free. They're in America. But truthfully, just like people who live in the cities and they know their kids are at risk of being shot, but they don't move, because how do you move when you're trapped in a situation? So I think we don't actually create programs to help people become free. We don't. And
well,
I don't know. Sorry.
You don't need a program. You just need to set people free.
Right, but maybe that's the program, is we tell them you can be free and go get a job or go do this.
Well,
close it down, keep your money, you're free.
There you go.
I mean, let's talk about solutions. We can't just educate people on how not to steal from the government. It would be nice, but we can't rely on it. Right now,
they're not
going to
do it, right?
Fraud.
Massive.
And Walz has chosen Optum Health, which is part of UHG, which, by the way, is guaranteed a percentage of the billings, right? This is how insurance companies in Minnesota work. So you have hired a company whose incentive it is to not reduce payments because they get a chunk of it, right? It's like, inviting the fox in to guard the hen house. It's not the right choice. You should have hired an accounting firm or an auditing firm to come in and audit this, not have someone from industry who's currently under investigation for defrauding the government on Medicaid payments.
That's really a serious question.
The Medicaid payments. That's the worst part.
Right.
The second thing we need to do is we need to bust public unions. We had on our show someone who worked in the Pelini administration, it was a Bill Glahn, that talked about, look, they tried to people in government. There are good people in government that know fraud is going on. Mm-hmm. They can't be incentivized to report it. We can't say, look, if this department catches fraud, we're going to give bonuses this year and equal to 2% of all the fraud you catch. And it sounds little, but if you caught $100 million in fraud, people are going to Vegas for their Christmas bonuses, right? You can incentivize people to root out this fraud. but the unions prohibit incentivizing people like that. You can't pay anybody anything different. So the unions need to be broken in Minnesota if we're gonna root out and change the processes that would reduce the fraud.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the unions and more broadly the bureaucracy, the unelected administrative state, and this is true at both the state and the federal level, is much more dangerous than anybody who you elect, right? Mm-hmm. Now, elections are important, and the people who we elect is important, very much so. But like Trump showed us during his first term, you can have all the right ideas and the best intentions, and if everybody around you who's a hireling is working to undermine you, very little of it is going to end up being implemented. Right. And so my fear going forward is, even if we manifest this dream of flipping Minnesota red and get a Republican trifecta and all this, that it's still going to be a slog because of the things like Jeremy is talking about, of the existing union contracts, the existing infrastructure, and the people throughout it. I mean, you can't just wave a magic wand and fire literally everybody, because somebody's got to run the agencies. But there's going to have to be some strategic, shall we say, pruning of the state agency bushes to get them under control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and this is where you'd like to see Republican candidates talking about this issue, how they're going to do it, and even maybe bringing on board some of the people ahead of time, like Trump did. These are my people, because that would help. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. This is Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and our special guest Walter Hudson, representative, who is doing great work for us. And so now we're gonna switch gears a little bit here, and we're gonna switch over to talk about some of the issues in the legislature, and particularly an issue that Republicans have been dealing with. So, Jeremy, let us have it.
Yeah. Well, Susan, we can talk ad nauseum about fraud in the administrative state and all these nonprofits that are taking money from the taxpayers. But ultimately, the legislature is in charge of setting up these programs and has oversight over the programs. And a lot of these programs get funding or growth through these multi-subject omnibus bills that lobbyists just love, because maybe some new program wouldn't have stood up on its own merits, being voted alone on the House floor. But when you slide it into the $30 billion HHS omnibus bill, it slides through with enough votes to allow that fraud to continue. When I was in the legislature, I came in when the House was in the majority and the Senate was in the majority, and they sat me next to Ron Kresha, who was the Republican majority whip on the floor. And they give you a mentor when you come to the legislature, and he was chosen to be my mentor, and he kind of taught me the ropes and showed me how to do things. And when I first got to know him, one of the first questions I asked him was, what do you do for a day job? And he said that he had a company that cities and counties could pay to get bonding bills and infrastructure bills and economic development money from the state or from the federal government. And he kind of, helped them along and ran their campaigns to do that. And right away I said, well, isn't that your job as a legislator already, to advocate for, economic development bills through deed and bonding bills and such? And, he kind of was a little flustered with me asking about that, but I felt that there was this great conflict, an ethics issue, where a legislator gets paid on the side to push bills through the bonding committee or to advance stuff through economic development grants. And his company is called Golden Shovel Agency LLC. And evidently,
you have to admit that name just kills me.
I know. Evidently, during COVID, he had testified in a lawsuit that he didn't have any employees, that they were all independent contractors. And then it also turns out during COVID that he applied for and received PPP loans in the amount of, I think, 300 and some $1,000, which were then forgiven. So they were gifts. And then the legislature passed legislation to not tax him on these gifts. So he got, over $300,000 that when he claimed he didn't have any employees. And this is the basis of a lawsuit filed in federal court. And it just kind of bubbled up as an ethics issue. And he announced this week that he was not going to run for re-election next year, but he's still going to continue his term through the end of next year. I feel like Ron Kresha is an example of someone that the Republicans should just root out and say, look, if we're going to run on fraud in 2026, we have to address issues like this in our own party. Not only does it look like he stole over $300,000 from taxpayers, and I understand there's a lot of fraud during PPP loans, but in addition to that, when I was in the legislature and I saw the conflicts like Ron Kresha and Kurt Dowd, who worked for a lobbying firm, I worked very hard to get past legislation that defines lobbying, because lobbying is self-reporting. Ron would have to go file as a lobbyist to say that he's actually lobbying for legislation, but he can't do that because he can't be a lobbyist and a legislator. We expanded the definition to say that if you just work for a company whose primary source of revenue is derived from facilitating government relations or government affairs between third parties, you are still not eligible to be a legislator. You have to resign. And that the House is required to adopt rules to enforce this section of law. But Ron Kresha is just having this company and getting compensated from it is in direct violation of the law and is not eligible to be a legislator.
So you're looking to me, so I'll take the prompt. Where to start? So these accusations against Kresha for the PPP loan are not new, going back to the point we were making offline about the perception of newness when it's not actually new. This was brought to the attention of the Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee back during session through the portal that we set up for whistleblowers to turn us on to issues. And we did sit down and take a look at it, we being the Republican members of the Fraud Committee. And we had a vigorous conversation about how to handle it. And there were basically two findings that we came to. The first was that an issue like this, a case like this, falls outside the jurisdiction of our committee, because our committee, the full name of it is Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight. That jurisdiction means we're taking a look at state agency processes as it relates to these programs that have been proven vulnerable to fraud. And that bears out in terms of what you've seen from the hearings that we've conducted, both during the session and in the interim. Typically, we're bringing in state agency representatives to ask them questions about their processes and hear presentations about their processes and kind of push back and try to dig and find out what's going on with all the fraud. A case like this with Kresha, which involves federal administrative dollars and is dealing with a member's ethics issue, is more properly referred to the ethics committee. Now, the thing with the ethics committee is, in order to have a complaint that gets referred to them, 2 members have to sign off on that complaint. That hasn't happened. And I think it's notable that none of the 67 Democrats have done this. And this is something that's been in the air for years. So the opportunity's been there. We're in a situation where we have a 67-67 tie. So it would be extremely advantageous for them to take out a Republican. And then in addition to that, this isn't the first lawsuit that's happened. The same guy has, I believe, 11 previous lawsuits, or this is the 11th lawsuit against multiple different members of the legislature, none of which have gone anywhere. This issue's been brought to the attention of the DOJ. They took a look at it and took a pass. And so where we're coming from as a caucus is because there's comparisons that's been made between this and, say, Justin Eichhorn for his misdeeds, or Nicole Mitchell on the other side, and how the Democrats propped her up like a weekend at Bernie's for so long. And the crucial difference there is Nicole Mitchell, she was arrested She was charged. She confessed, all in the same minute, right? With Justin Eichhorn, he was arrested. He was charged. There were charging documents you could look at, findings of fact that were actionable. In Kresha's case, I will, and I'll go into detail. I am genuinely concerned about what I know of this situation, because there's really two issues at play. So the one thing that I don't think was mentioned by Jeremy was the issue of independent contractors. So Kresha's company utilizes independent contractors rather than employees. And when you look at the PPP loan application, it actually says in there that you're eligible for the program if you have independent contractors. So I looked at that and I said, oh, well, there you go. There's no there. I later discovered that there is a second criteria. So there's the eligible to apply, and then there's how you calculate the dollars that you're asking for. Mm-hmm. And it's that part that says it's supposed to be based on employees, not on independent contractors. And the justification for that, the reasoning behind that, is that you don't want people to double dip, right?
Exactly.
So for if Kresha took out this loan and paid out his independent contractors, and then they individually took out loans to pay out themselves, that's double dipping. So one of the crucial pieces of information that I think needs to be revealed is whether that happened, right? Because I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that part of the reason why this hasn't gone anywhere is likely because the spirit of the program was fulfilled. Like, the whole point of the program was to make sure people got paid during COVID, and those people got paid. It wasn't the way it's supposed to happen on paper, but if there was no double dipping, it's the same outcome, just with a screwed up process. I don't know that, but that's kind of my theory. Because it is a compelling narrative, the way it's outlined. Yet time and time again, the entities that have looked at it have said there's nothing here that's worth looking at.
And the question would be, hypothetically, if you were Ron Kresha, if he did get money and he did pay independent contractors.
Yeah.
And those independent contractors could have, unbeknownst to him, also filed. So he might not have even known. So this is, I think, is...
Which is why you're not supposed to do it in the first place.
Right,
yeah.
But there is a problem in general with these systems that are created quickly, right, albeit, but when they build into the process confusion...
Yeah.
I think this is one of the things that is difficult about a lot of this government stuff, is that it's not clear. A lot of things aren't clear. People don't understand how things happen. People, they think, it's like when you're driving and your speed limit is 70, and then behind a tree, there's a speed limit drop to 50. And now you get it, and you couldn't, now you got to go and figure out whatever, that we shouldn't make programs confusing. They shouldn't be confusing. And,
Susan,
I'm not even saying we should have the program in the first place. Let me be clear about that. I'm not saying we should have the program. But then when we bake in a layer of confusion, right, we make it hard.
How about we just not shut down civilization for a virus?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, in the ideal world, none of that should have happened. But then I'm not saying Ron Kresha's right.
The bottom line is that
Yeah.
Kresha's business was not harmed because of the shutdown.
Correct.
His business actually accelerated
Expanded.
during COVID, because that's when all the economic development money and bonding bills and everything else just cruised through, and so he was not harmed.
Yeah,
This
we haven't even
was
talked
clean
about
fraud.
that, Jeremy. There you go. Right. I mean, there's some other issues there. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and Walter Hudson, and we're going to sort of move this issue to the issue of fraud, potentially concerns about lobbying. And I think, as all of us really should recognize, that the money in politics often has nothing to do at all with Minnesota. Like, the money in Minnesota politics often has nothing to do with Minnesota. We have a lot of money flowing into all of our races, statewide races, federal races, state races. And we have these, lobbyists who have tremendous power. We have PACs, which nobody even knows who these people are that are influencing our politics. And, our government is supposed to be representative of the people, not representative of the PACs. They didn't even know what that was back when we founded this country. But for sure, they didn't think of PACs in the same way. Can you imagine? So we're in a serious time in our country where people are being boxed out of the political process and their voices. While we have all the social media and we have all the Twitter, you can do all these things. The reality is it's getting harder and harder for people to impact the political process because of the money. We hear it all the time. So-and-so can't run. They're never going to raise the money. So-and-so can't run. This is a waste of time. You're blah, blah, blah. Well, remember when a long time ago, your local legislators actually were from your community and they knew everybody knew who they were and they'd shake hands and they'd, not anymore, right? I mean, maybe they are, but now we actually want to be able to hide their addresses so you can't even find them, right? I mean, seriously, that's true. So, I'm just saying, like, we are in an interesting time, right? Especially in Minnesota, where we did have people shot, somebody murdered. I'm not saying some of these fears aren't, valid, but I'm saying, how do we have representative government of the people when the people are having a harder and harder time even participating and accessing their elected officials at every level, right?
Right. And Susan, I mean, it's important to know that a registered lobbyist can't give Walter more than $5. They can't buy him a drink. They can't buy him breakfast. They can write a check to his campaign, but it has to be disclosed that it came from this lobbying firm, and it can only be up to $1,000. There's limits on that. But the fact that a lobbyist can't give Walter more than $5, but a lobbying firm can put Walter on the payroll and give him a check for $300,000 a year as a consultant, that is the problem that I addressed in the legislature, because there were legislators who were being paid six-figure salaries from lobbying firms or from public advocacy groups or from, in the case of Kurt Doubt, Stateside and Associates, which represents hundreds and hundreds of international corporations and basically sends people in with the lobbyists to go lobby for stuff, or they hire powerful legislators to just be employees of the company. They had the majority leader in the state of New York. They had Kurt Doubt when he was the minority leader in the state of Minnesota on their payroll, and Kurt still is. It is absolutely corrupt and unethical for legislators to be paid by these companies. So we passed this legislation on the last day of that I served in the legislature to ban it, and it expands the definition to cover people like Ron Kresha, who refuse to file as a lobbyist, even though their companies are lobbying or pushing legislation, running campaigns. And also, because Ron said this, it wasn't in his district that he was doing this. The law specifically says this prohibition applies regardless of the location where the work of the business is substantially conducted or its clients are located. So even though Ron Kresha is working on lobbying for deed handouts over in Colorado or in outside of his district, somewhere else in Minnesota, it is still illegal. And he can't be a representative while receiving compensation from these companies. This is the kind of stuff that there's a bunch of Democrats who sit on the board in a paid position of nonprofits and then work to advance legislation where those nonprofits receive money. This is where the fraud starts.
Or maybe their
It's
spouse.
administered by our agency, or their spouses, but it starts in the legislature, and we have to start rooting this out right here in the legislature.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like a sieve or a spaghetti strainer, right? Like there's so many holes in the bottom that when you plug up one, that it's just going to be more volume going through the other slots, right? And I guess I wonder, like we talk about PACs and how terrible PACs are in the dark money, and it's a genuine problem. But you know what causes that problem? Individual campaign contribution limits.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm with you there.
Totally. We should get rid of that. And
Let's
so
full
if you want
disclose
to
every
take a
dollar.
40,000 contribution from UHG, then I know exactly how you're voting, right?
Yeah, right.
It's going
I
right to your
agree.
campaign.
Totally.
And that's the thing is, I don't know how you really truly stop influence peddling in an effective systemic way. I think it's probably a better goal to make it transparent, right? To where we know what the associations of people are. We know who's getting what money from where, so we can connect dots. Because people are always going to find a way, somehow, some way, to make it work, right? Whether it's 3 degrees of separation. Okay, your spouse can't do X, Y, and Z. All right, well, I'll find a cousin, right?
Right, that's right.
There's always going to be some way to work around the system.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is just like top level idea. I haven't really thought this through. But if you were to incentivize it to be more transparent and permissive, then you know what people's influences are. It's not hidden through all these like networks.
But it's still there. I mean, don't this law that I'm talking about that's 3.084 for, it's called lobbying activities prohibited. This is for the state legislature. Don't you see that Ron Kresha is in direct violation of this law since he's being paid by his Golden Shovel Agency LLC?
I would have to know more about specifically what his group was doing. Today was actually the first time I heard that. I heard Golden Shovel. I figured he was in construction. Like honestly, right? I would have to know more about what he's doing. I mean, you're talking about him doing things in Colorado and things like that, which is, I don't know if he's doing stuff here, but yeah, it's potentially
the law
problematic.
says it doesn't matter because you're being paid to lobby for legislation, and it's you can't serve two masters. You can't serve your taxpayers in your district while also being paid to take their money and give it away to another company. Like we need more ethical people in the legislature if we're gonna stop this fraud from the get-go, instead of people going to the legislature and getting rich off the taxpayer dime.
That's certainly true. What I wonder about is, does anyone ever truly not have two masters when it comes to this? Because everybody's makes money doing something, or their wife makes money doing something, or their kids, grown-up kids, make money doing something. So there's always going to be this personal economic interest, whether it's explicit or not. And that's why I kind of think in terms of, like at those what do they call them? The splash pads where the kids will have the different jets of water, and the game is you step on one and it makes the other one go higher.
Right, yeah,
right? It's like, is that what we're doing with these ways of attempting to combat this perceived ethical violation? Are we not actually making a difference? Are we just shifting it over to another mechanism to accomplish the same thing? I don't know.
I mean, you can't conflate the two. I would vote for tax cuts, and yes, I earn a living, and so it benefits me to reduce my taxes in general. That's fine. But when someone is writing a 6-figure check to me to pass a certain bonding bill, that is in direct violation. I mean, that is absolutely unethical. And this guy's been doing it for more than a decade. People like this need to be rooted out of the legislature. If Republicans are going to win on rooting out fraud next year, we can't have someone who has taken over $300,000 from the taxpayers unlawfully and continues to be a legislator in direct violation of the law.
I wish that we had a system where it's like take a turn, Patriot, right? Like in the legislature, everybody take a turn, like jury duty or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
I've thought about that.
The 500 people at the first people in the phone book. This idea that we as citizens, I'm not saying everybody needs to go to the legislature. There's a lot of ways that people can get involved civically, right, to make a difference in our society. And people don't get engaged because they think someone else has got it covered for them. I think we're very happy to just not, we'd rather not know. Once we know, then we feel like we got to do something. So we kind of put these blinders on and we engage in our little things that we do. But we don't really want to know the truth, at any level, by the way. I mean, it's just what we do. And so I think, Jeremy's right. We don't want people who are corrupted, but we also want good people to be able to easily figure out what's going on and call people out. And I'm going to say, if you haven't met somebody, especially at the state level, in the city level, if you haven't shaken the hand of somebody running for office and, talked to them a little bit, and you don't know anything about them, that's tragic. It's hard at the federal level. Like, not everybody's going to sit down with your congressperson. I mean, there's just, they have 800,000. But I mean, at the state level, if you don't have any idea who your Republican people are or your Democrat people, if you're a Democrat, you need to figure that out, because how do we run our country and our state and our cities when our population's checked out? So we're going to get the music and our time's almost up. I think this is a conversation, the civic duties that we all have if we want to save our state, save our country, are real.
Yeah, I'll say the thing that has surprised me probably the most in this role is the extent to which people don't seem to be interested in having a conversation.
Right.
On whether they agree with you or not. Like, they just assume you're too busy. It's like, no, dude, I can schedule a meeting. Like,
right.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, thank you, Walter, for coming on the show to talk about fraud today.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll be back next week, and we'll be probably, I'm sure, talking about fraud again.